everyone. I'm Jayne Groll, CEO of the DevOps Institute. I'm here today with Kevin Dunne of QA Symphony, and we're going to talk a little bit about what we've seen and heard at Jenkins World, particularly as it relates to testing. So welcome, Kevin.
Thank you. Very excited to be here, so I appreciate you guys having us out by the booth.
Really excited to have a conversation with you. Testing is such an important topic, and I think we've all kind of picked up a little bit of a theme here about the importance of automated and continuous testing. So what have you picked up? First of all, tell us a little bit about QA Symphony.
Yeah, sure. So QA Symphony, we're a fairly new company, really been around for about 5 years now, based in Atlanta. And so we're here at Jenkins World for the first time. We do integrate to Jenkins and kind of provide a overall level of traceability and management reporting of all of the testing that may be happening during the builds in the pipeline, as well as some manual testing and more ad hoc automation that may be happening afterwards. So really tying the worlds of Jenkins and things like Jira, for example, together to give that kind of company-wide view of quality, which, as you mentioned, is really important as you move to DevOps.
Yeah. Why do you think organizations, particularly those that are getting involved in DevOps and certainly from Jenkins, are really struggling with moving from manual testing to automated testing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that first of all, it gets a little bit ignored, right? Everyone is thinking about how can we set up to deliver code really quickly, and then they think about the testing afterwards, usually after they have some sort of bad experience where code goes out to market and wasn't as tested as well as they thought, right? So that's one thing, is we just don't see it sort of on the CIO level priority list. You don't hear people talking about testing a lot, even though obviously we all want our customers to have a great experience, right? I think one of the other things too is that it's just a big mindset change, to move towards automated testing. That's a totally different process, right? You really need to think about how you're going to test something up front. And so that's where you see that test-driven development, behavior-driven development, they're coming back and becoming more popular, even though these things have been around for a while, right? With extreme programming, things like that. 20 years ago, people were talking about this stuff, and now people are starting to see that it's really a reality. And the big thing as well is it's definitely a skill set change, right? I mean, if you're going to go from being a manual tester to being an automated tester, you're going to have to pick up some new skills around coding, understand more about the architecture, right? And for a lot of people, that can be tough. And so, that's somewhere where we hope to build tools, continue to build tools that help to bridge that gap a little bit, so that these testers that have a lot of experience in the applications really know what they're doing, can become more technical, over time through the tools we're using, and, still be value-added members of the team.
Yeah, and I think you really hit on something in the skills and competency arena. Test-driven development is a real thing, right?
Yeah.
And so developers are having to learn how to test. I mean,
Yeah.
I know at DevOps Institute, we recently introduced a DevOps test engineering course that was really not meant to be specific to QA, right? Everybody in IT these days has to develop some coding skills and some testing skills, because somewhere along the way in their current and future roles, this is going to be an important part of it. What are you seeing as far as that goes?
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's a lot of different companies out there slicing it in different ways, right? Some people are taking testers and trying to make them more technical, like I mentioned, and have that be sort of the way that their tests get written, right? Obviously, still developers need to write unit tests, though, right? And testers are really usually writing more of the integration level UI tests and things like that. So how do you get developers to write good unit tests? Well, we've seen a lot of companies, I know Pivotal, for example, they claim really to not have, I don't think, any testers that are just specifically testers, but they do have some of the leading names in the space. I think Lisa Crispin is one of the people that's out there, Pivotal, and they're just really champions for teaching developers how to write good tests, and also just making sure that quality, is baked into the process up front. So that's interesting thing that, testers a lot of times are transitioning from actually spending their whole day writing tests to being sort of these overall champions for quality, which is obviously a big change for them. A lot of testers, tend to be or can be sort of shy people that keep to themselves, and now they're being pushed into these roles to be really quality advocates in the team, which seems to be successful, in some places, but a lot of different approaches, obviously, to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of the remnants of Waterfall, right? I mean,
Yep.
it's there's a term water scrum fall where you kind of
Yeah.
embed Agile in the middle of it, but at the end of the day, we're still doing Waterfall, where testing was really kind of a downstream, very linear activity,
Yep.
and QA people were groomed for that,
Yep,
right?
yep, yeah. They were siloed as well, right? So, very knowledgeable people. But typically, what we saw with testers was they really focused on one particular area of skills. They would be really good at, say, performance testing on a certain part of the application, right? But then, as you move into the agile delivery, you're breaking up these silos and you're embedding testers a lot of times into teams, and so that becomes a big transition for people. Is oh, well, I used to be very sort of deep in this one particular area, right? I knew how to really do performance testing well in this specific part of the application. Now I'm the only tester on this Agile team, right? So I got to know how to do some performance testing, API testing, functional testing, right, across the whole, part of the application that I'm responsible for on that team. And then also, I've got to be able to contribute in a Scrum meeting, right? If I'm really doing Scrum, I've got to be there, able to kind of put my thoughts in about are these good user stories? Is this going to work how the user would expect, right? So that's definitely a big transition for people with Waterfall. And you see a lot of companies also outsource testing in Waterfall, and now they're trying to bring it back in-house. So it's a competency in many cases they've lost, entirely, right? They've just kind of ignored it, outsourced it, or offshored it. And now with Agile, we need a lot of those co-located teams who got to bring it back here on shore and inside our companies. So certainly a lot of struggles there, but nothing that can't be overcome.
Yeah, the awesome message there is that continuous testing, automated testing, is really not a threat to the humans of QA, right?
No, not
It
at
actually
all.
gives them a chance to share their skills, to be champions, to be mentors, to be subject matter experts, and to really spread that knowledge across the value stream,
Yep.
and evolve their own skills. As you said, instead of being narrowly focused, they really get to evolve their skills as well. So it's a growth path, really,
Yep.
for QA, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're becoming even more, kind of integral to the success of the team, right? It's not an afterthought and a validation and a gatekeeper, right? It used to be that QA was kind of a gatekeeper and seen as kind of a pain that developers had to go through. Now it's developers rely on these automated tests, right? It's the only feedback that they have about whether or not the code that they're writing is actually good, and they need it immediately because in many cases, right, the build breaks, we all stop everything that we're doing to go and actually fix that. And so if we don't have confidence in those tests and the fact that those tests, when they're failing, breaking the build, and having everyone stop and put down everything, we don't really have much to go off of, right? So QA is, I think, becoming very much so elevated, which is exciting for the tester. And I think that if they can embrace the culture changes, the process changes, some of these new skills, and survive that transition, it's a very exciting place to be a tester going into this sort of continuous delivery, continuous testing world.
Yeah. So you mentioned before this is your first year at Jenkins World. So
Yes.
what's your impression of the community, of the Jenkins community, of this past couple of days?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, I had no expectations coming into the event, right? But we've met with a lot of great people here. I expected to really be talking a lot more with smaller companies, as some of the enterprises are still kind of getting their, feet underneath them around how to do Agile and haven't really moved on maybe to the downstream, how to do continuous delivery, continuous integration. But you see a lot of big companies here presenting that are doing it very well, adopting some of these behavior-driven development, test-driven development processes that our tools support, like Capital One, for example. A bunch of people here from there. So that's really exciting to kind of share some of our thoughts and have some good conversations with companies here. So it's been great. We're really focused a lot on the Atlassian ecosystem as well. And you can see there's sort of a similar kind of excitement here with people around these tools and what these tools can do to ultimately transform the business, right? And you see there's a lot of people here that aren't even really release engineers. They're really more on the business side of the house, and they're here coming to learn about DevOps and the impact that can have on kind of the success of the business, delivering revenue and customer growth and all of that. So that's for me great to see that that visibility is getting all the way up to even the CEO level of these big organizations.
Yeah, it's amazing energy, right? I
Yeah.
mean, at the business level, at the practitioner level, different competencies. I mean, I was here last year, and I would tell you that Last year it was a great conference. This year was an awesome conference. I mean, I think that people are much more curious. I think they've matured a little bit. And you're right. I think that from a startup space to an enterprise space, years ago there was a question about whether DevOps could even work at scale. And I
Right.
think that question is being asked and answered.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to take time, but there's certainly case studies here of companies that are successful doing it. And I think it's great, too, that people aren't really hoarding these as, company secrets about how they got to this DevOps success. The great thing I appreciate here is that people are very open, willing to share their experience, and help people who are now trying to go through that transition from falling into the same sort of pitfalls and traps that they fell into along the way. So I really like that sense of community here, and it's very much so kind of best practices oriented. And I've been impressed, at the vendors like us, willingness to kind of not be selling their tool in these presentations and really be selling kind of more of the success stories. And I think that from what I've seen is really getting a lot of people excited about the possibilities around DevOps. So.
Yeah, a year from now, it'll be interesting to see that evolution as well.
Yeah, well, we'll certainly be back next year. I think this was a good experiment for the first year, and this one will be one that we'll certainly look forward to in the coming years. So I can't wait to see next year. If this is 2000 this year, I don't know what they have planned for next year, but might need to get a new venue, I think, if it's going to get even bigger than this. So
good. Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your insight. Thank you for talking a little bit about testing and what you're seeing in the testing space. Really very much appreciate that.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot. Appreciate you having us.
Great. So I'm Jayne Groll, CEO of the DevOps Institute. We're here at Jenkins World, and thanks again, Kevin, for sharing some insight about testing.